everybody. I hope everyone had a wonderful lunch and met some new people. Thanks to the chefs who made these wonderful recipes from New York Times Cooking. We're kicking off the afternoon with a panel led by my colleague, Kim Severson, the national food correspondent for the New York Times. Settle in, we're really excited about this afternoon's programming.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for being here. This session's about food, which is like my favorite thing, and I work for the food section, and I'm very glad that our lunch was done by my colleagues in NYT Cooking. I hope it was good. Please give us 5 stars on Yelp. Would appreciate it. So we're going to have a conversation, and on this session we're going to have some questions at the end. So we'll have some mic runners, and at the end if you have some questions for our guests, that would be great. Oh, and who are our guests? Well, Dr. Dacher Keltner is one of our nation's foremost scholars on well-being and an expert on awe, compassion, love, and many of my other favorite emotions. He teaches a popular undergraduate psychology course called Human Happiness at UC Berkeley, where he helped found the Greater Good Science Center. His latest book is Awe, the New Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. And he's also behind this wildly popular podcast, The Science of Happiness. So welcome, Dacher. And also we have the dreamy Samin Nosrat, who is one of our country's great cooks. It's true. Time magazine called her one of the 100 most influential people. And her 2017 book, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, is one of the best-selling cookbooks of all time. Excuse me. It's really kind of the joy of cooking for a new generation, and I don't have, anybody here ever seen that book? All right. It also sparked a Netflix series and a lot of other projects, including one with Michelle Obama. She's a podcaster.
Also, I've known Kim since I was 19 years old.
All right, I wasn't going to say that part. No, I had to do an interview with Alice Waters at Chez Panisse like a million years ago when I worked in San Francisco, and that's when I met you. I think you were assigned to keep me out of trouble or something.
They told me to keep you busy, yeah.
No, she didn't, and look what happened. I will say that the crowning achievement for me, for Samin, is that she was also a New York Times cooking columnist for a while. So, Samin has a new book coming out in September. It's called Good Things, which I just read a galley of. And in this book, the premise of it is what happened to you after all the success that you had. And you went into a very dark place that I think almost took you down. And Dacher's work and Dacher himself helped pull you out of it. And you talk about that in the book, but can you share a little bit about what happened?
Sure. I mean, I rose to all of the highest heights and achieved all the things and many things beyond what I'd ever hoped to achieve. And then I still felt really lonely and empty and sad. And sort of one by one, these large pieces of my life started to fall apart, and very old, repressed grief surfaced. I had a sister who died when I was a baby, and I had never really processed that, so I went to face that. I went to face a lot of the secrets of my family history that had not ever been shared with me. And in the middle of all that, I had this book that I was supposed to write about cooking. And for many people, they associate me with joy and happiness, and I did not feel any joy or happiness. And then just when I was sort of climbing out of that, my dad, who was a very difficult and violent person, befell a terrible brain injury and then spent 6 months, very melodramatic months in the hospital until he passed away. And so there was just like sort of loss after loss after loss. And somehow, and also, of course, inside of all of that, we had the pandemic, we had George Floyd's murder and the uprising after that. There was a lot. There was just so much. And I was like, I don't know, I was surviving on like frozen pizza and Barbara's cheese puffs and watermelon. And I was like, how am I supposed to write a book about cooking? There's no meaning in this for me. And I had to reground myself and find some meaning. And so some books completely unrelated to food helped me find that. And one was a book called The Sabbath by the rabbi philosopher Abraham Joshua Heschel. And I felt like my takeaway from that book was that our most precious currency in life is not things, but time. And so to extend that in cooking and in eating together, like one of the most precious things that we can do for and with each other is to cook for each other and to eat together, to spend that time. And then around that time, Dacher's amazing book, Awe, came out. And I hope you all go read it. It's really life-changing. And I'll let him talk about the science of awe, but really, I sort of decided, what if I could just refocus myself on spending a little bit of my energy and time each day on feeling this feeling?
Well, I've known Samin for quite some time through Michael Pollan and had wonderful dinners, and I remember Samin coming to me in this really difficult time in her life, seeking meaning. And I remember your thesis, and I can't wait to read about it, which is that recipes and cooking is really a transcendent experience. It takes us back in family history, in time, in the thinking about the evolution of food. And so we talked a lot about that. And that's what awe is. Awe is this incredible emotion that connects us to things that are bigger than the self. We find it in music, and I know you were just with Yo-Yo Ma, and nature, and art, and big ideas. And what an interesting idea that cooking can be really an primordial access to awe, right? You're sharing it with people, you're collaborating, you're thinking about the deep story of your food, and so...
And nature, and like the nature from which the food comes, and the stories that it holds,
And so, there's the actual act of cooking, right? And, where you select what you're gonna, we select the right vegetable and you cut it and you think about how you're gonna, and the alchemy of heat and all of that, which is sort of spiritual in one way.
Yep.
And then there's the table, right? So talk to me a little bit about the two different forms of joy that, like, we will talk about the table in a minute, but just the act of cooking or creating. Maybe both of you can just jump in, and since you're the cook, we'll start with you.
I mean, for me, and I just want to be clear, like, I eat a lot of Trader Joe's frozen scallion pancakes. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, every time I cook, it's not like the sky, like, shining down upon me. There's a lot of just peanut butter sandwiches, But when I'm able to, and often when I most need to get out of my head, cooking is a way I can get out of my head and into my body. It's where I can have a sensory experience, even if it's just, sometimes it's like something as simple as I've sliced a whole bunch of celery on a diagonal, and I put it in the bowl, and it's floating, and it's just making these beautiful shapes. And I could just marvel for a second about those shapes and the geometry of that, and it's almost an artwork in and of itself. Sometimes it's picking the basil out of the garden. Sometimes it is a truly extraordinary moment of going to an apricot orchard and picking my favorite fruit of the year. But I do think it's that slowing down. And I think at the heart of awe is that sense that you're connected to something bigger. And so for me, it's when I'm cooking, anytime I can get that, if it's like remembering that this olive oil came from this beautiful hillside on, the hills of Tuscany where I've visited, or just sort of connecting to something and getting out of my own way, that's where I can feel that.
Yeah, well, I get to follow that poetic description with a little bit of science. Cooking food, I mean, the first thing to remember is the right kinds of foods that you grew up with activate the reward circuitry in your brain. It's one of the deepest pathways to real contentment and pleasure, the dopamine circuits in the nucleus accumbens. And I feel that with certain flavors.
Like what?
Oh,
what are your childhood?
I know, it's embarrassing in some sense because I'm
She just said she's frozen pizza, so you're good.
Oh, well, I could beat that. I'm kind of a moosewood child, if you will.
Yeah.
I grew up in the late 60s. My mom made fresh yogurt. She sent me fig bars to my college that arrived months later covered in fungus. I was like, Mom, I want some chocolate bars, you know. So for me, it's lentils and refried beans, always going in a rhythmic pattern on the weekend. And it just gives me this sense of deep connection to the Mexican neighborhoods I grew up in, my best friend Memo, the fact that I was born in Mexico, that I grew up on my favorite food in the world. So it's this transportation to the past that's part of cooking.
Yeah, food memory is one of the strongest things. Let's just talk for a minute now about the table and communing. And you know, obviously this is a huge part of why we like to do what we do, right, is eating with someone else. So you had just talked about a study that mentioned how often we are eating alone. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this conference is entitled Well, and in some sense the antimatter of well, its opposite is loneliness and hungering to be with other people. We are our most well with the right mixture of people. There's research coming out in the World Happiness Report, and you probably sense this in your own life. 25% of the meals that people in the United States eat, they eat by themselves. And I was talking with Kim, that is a historical exception, unlike almost anything in the history of our species. 400,000 years ago, we started building fires. We started to build fires to cook with each other around the tables of the hearth of our evolution. We now know from anthropology, we told the most important stories of our people and our identity. We shared, we synced up, we found awe. And that has been disrupted by our modern lives. I will very often at Berkeley get a burrito and walk across campus eating with food, beans spilling on my shirt. You know, it's absurd.
Me too.
And it tastes good, but we've lost the table and community.
In another, like Japan or Italy, eating on the street would just be unheard of, right? It would just be a terrible thing to do.
Yeah, I was just in Kyoto, and there are signs that say, eat the food in the restaurant. And I was like, how preposterous. I want to buy food and eat it in the streets, you know?
Because in America, we're number one. We eat in the streets. We eat wherever we want.
By ourselves.
Right.
And so that's
by ourselves. It's fantastic.
It's worrisome.
Yeah. Samin, there are moments when eating, and as somebody who's worked in restaurants and you serve people and all of that comes, and people expect you when they come to your home, I'm sure, like, you know, you have to, you know, you make it nice. It's nice to make it nice. But it can be annoying, right? So there are times that you take solitude in eating by yourself?
I mean, I've lived by myself for so long, so I do eat a lot of my meals on my own.
And do you watch TV or scroll? Or
I definitely watch TV, but I have a beautiful garden, so sometimes I try to force myself to go outside, even if I'm reading a book. So of course I do it, but I definitely feel the best when I make the effort to not eat by myself. And I would say the highest example of that is that for almost 5 years now, I've had a recurring weekly meal with a group of friends that sort of happened by accident, but we all say now it's become our church. And it seems like the simplest possible thing. And also it takes like a fair amount of work to keep it going. And I think it's become the heart of our lives in a lot of ways. And what's funny is the people I do it with were not the closest people to me in my life by any means. They were sort of like 1.5 rings out from my like central, you know, favorites list on my phone. But it just sort of happened. And now they have become, like we really have become, proximity and time together has made us family. And, you know, I think when I talk about this, I think people might be like, well, of course you can have a weekly dinner, you're a chef. But I don't do all of the cooking, and sometimes I don't do any of the cooking. And it's very much about like a shared experience in all ways.
And when you say it takes them, because I think it's the thing that we all would love to do, you know, it seems like such a great thing. Keeping it up is the tough part. I'm just practicality. We want you to leave with tips here. Like, how do you have like one person are you the ringleader, or is there a group?
No, there's no ringleader, but I've spent a lot of time thinking about what makes it work and why this particular effort works when I know I and other people I know have tried to institute some sort of recurring meal that has not worked. And I think we sort of accidentally tripped onto some things that make it a lot easier. And the first one is it's always in the same place at the same time. So I think your instinct might be to share the labor of hosting and move it around every week.
Right.
But by making it in the same place at the same time, that's one less thing we have to correspond about. And also over time now, I've gotten really familiar with these people, my friends' home and their kitchen, and I know what's there. So it has less of a potluck vibe and more of a I'm just cooking in somebody else's kitchen who I'm familiar with vibe. We have a text chain that's pretty fun of like throughout the week, if someone sees something that they want to cook, we'll do that. We'll always celebrate each other's birthdays. And I'm sure there is some amount of ease that's brought to everyone by my facility with cooking for a big group, but also we often just eat a bowl of beans and rice, or sometimes we order empanadas or pizza. It's not as much about what's on the table as the fact that we continue to gather around the table.
Can people bring guests? This is an interesting issue.
People bring guests,
So bring it
totally.
on.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to get to one other thing, but first about the table. I know Jose Andres says, you know, the world will be better. We just need to build longer tables, and we all need to come together. You know, like hummus diplomacy will solve the situation in Gaza. And I think some of that is overstated. I think it's dreamy, and I think it's unrealistic. And I just want to put that out to you two. Like, you know, it's very romantic to say that, but your idea of communing at the table, is that going to make the world a better place? Going to solve world peace?
Well, if you think about Vivek Murthy, our former Surgeon General, championing that loneliness is an epidemic, and if you study the science of loneliness, where you don't have the contact, you're by yourself, you're on scrolling or whatever the case is, that leads to cynicism, to hostility, to anger, to sexism, racism. That's all documented scientifically. And one of the strongest pathways to the antithesis of that is eating together, right? Is to find, as Samin talked about, just a way to eat together. I feel I eat together when I go to Cancun Taqueria 2 to 3 times a week in Berkeley, California. They all know me. They know what I'm going to order. I have the same pattern. There are many ways to eat together.
Totally, and I think that's a ritual that you have, and this is a ritual that we have. And from what I understand, creating rituals of any size or any complexity in your life is actually a really important step toward meaning and toward happiness.
Yeah, and there are historical studies. You think about your table and the rituals that it offers, right? And think about your own of asking your teenagers what their roses and thorns were at school, right? Little informal types of grace that people intuitively come up with. We've been doing research on rituals, and about 15% of rituals happen at the table, right? Just organically.
That's cool.
Find them.
So it's the little things as opposed to the giant, we're going to solve world peace through the longer table.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I love the sentiment, and I used to say the same things, but I also feel like that would be ignoring all of the systemic issues that really deserve a lot of attention. But I do think that this is a powerful thing to do on an individual level.
So it's an individual thing. Because I do think those kind of statements are kind of from people who are in a place of privilege to be able to say that, you know, and it's a lovely sentiment. And we're going to go to questions in a minute, but I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the ways people talk about food that I hate, which is guilty pleasures or like indulgence or what's your or this like sinful, like when there's like a sinful something dessert item, I'm like, next, I'm not going to ever order that. What is it about, like, why do we demonize, is it a bodium, is it a Puritanian, like, what is it? Why do we have guilty pleasures?
I mean, I don't know why. It does feel like sort of the dregs of Puritanism, like sort of showing up in our daily life.
Yeah.
But I think we're all infected to some degree with that, and I do a lot of work to sort of disinfect my brain and try to, when I'm having something that tastes good, and to just try to feel pleasure. I think so much of my life I've not allowed myself pleasure, and I think, yeah, I mean, I wonder too, there must be some relationship between pleasure and happiness.
Yeah, profound. Yeah, and a lot of data on that. The other conceptual mistake I think we make with food, and this was pointed out by a great social scientist, Paul Rozin, at the University of Pennsylvania, who inspired Omnivore's Dilemma and the title in Michael Pollan's incredible book and mentor of Samin. Paul did a lot of research and found, and he would compare the French with Western European Americans, and that's a no-brainer where that's going to go. The French food is about aesthetic pleasure, and we think of food too often as fuel, right? And I do a lot of that, like, okay, I'm sagging in energy, I'll eat these peanuts or whatever. And we miss the point of food in some sense.
And I also think, obviously diet culture and body image and our internalized sense of what we should look like. And, and we live in we have an obesity issue in this country in a way that isn't
worldwide.
I'm not saying it's a fat shaming thing. I think it's quite unhealthy, because of the food environment that we're stuck in, right? The highly overprocessed foods and that sort of thing. But again, you don't want to get into a situation where you're like, you shouldn't drink that soda.
I know.
Because that soda's given someone pleasure. Yeah. I mean, so it's I don't know if it's a quirk of American culture or, I don't know, we're diet culture in this country, because certainly we know eating disorders are very real and very serious in this country, and pleasure from food, like making those two worlds, heal each other. I don't know, it's a challenge.
Well, I think that's why Samin's work in this forthcoming book is fundamental, which is people have become disconnected from the deep reasons we have to enjoy food, and we need scholars like Samin to course correct. 8 to 20% of people in the United States, young people, have eating issues, eating disorders. 65% or so food restrict at some time in their lives. How could we do that, right? And so we need knowledge to get us on the right path.
Thank you. I think on that, we'll go to some questions. I know you all probably have, we're not going to have monologues, we'll just have questions. So I'm sure you all have, do we have mic runners? Just raise, don't be shy. There we go. Up here is one person, and over here is another person. Thank you. We'll start with you two.
Hello, thank you for this amazing talk. So I'm Mediterranean, and my question would be about ingredients that are a happiness booster. Like, what's your take about eating more sardines and walnuts and just loving all these ingredients to boost happiness?
So ingredients that are happiness and wellness boosters. Do you have some suggestions?
Oh.
Okay.
Is there some research about happiness ingredients?
Okay, tell us wait a minute.
I'm not familiar with that. I think it's just
You have to tell us, so give her
have.
the microphone a second. I want her 3 happiness ingredients that we can all cook with. Dark chocolate? Walnuts?
Oh, and
Walnuts, sardines, and dark chocolate. Okay.
I had no idea. Sardines, walnuts, and dark chocolate.
Okay, there we're off to the races.
I wish, I'm going to look that up. I didn't know
All right.
that. That's cool.
This is your next book. Great.
I will say, regardless of the science, I do think so much of emotion tied to food has to do with your own life and your own past.
Yeah.
And so that's very cool. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start carrying sardines.
What is
around
your
my pocket.
one thing? There must be one thing that you were do you have the childhood?
My taste.
Yeah.
There's so many.
The rice, the
for me, Iranians, my family's from Iran, and Iranians really are fruit obsessed. And not only fruit, but the moment of ripeness of a particular fruit. And so for me, I really delight in sort of the moment that something comes into season. Like the other day I was at a grocery shop, and a guy recognized me, and he brought me a pile of these Persian sour green plums. You eat them kind of like cherries, they're crunchy. And he was so happy, and I just was like, oh my God, I haven't had this since I was in Iran. So.
Look for that.
Yeah.
Great. Let's go here.
Hi, hello. I'm a journalist from Turkey, so similar question maybe, so I'll change my question. I lived in Japan for a long time, and fermentation is like the best in that country. Do you see any techniques that are from the East or from our region, where in Turkey also we do lots of pickling, that are coming to the US or that should be brought to the US? Any cooking techniques or any cooking approaches?
Oh.
I do feel like we're in the beginning of fermentation taking off. Am I wrong?
Yeah,
about
I mean,
that?
I feel like that there are a lot of amazing chefs who've brought their fermentation techniques over from, there's also in Denmark, the Noma Lab, which brings some of the greatest fermentation experts from around the world. Actually, in the Brooklyn Navy Yard right here, my friend Chris Crawford has a company called Tart Vinegar, and she's a one-woman vinegar making operation, and she travels all over this geographical region, collecting beautiful ingredients to make like bespoke, delicate vinegars. And she's kind of like a mad genius. And I do think there is a little bit more interest in that. And the thing I think is sort of at the core of your question is about traditional cultures and traditional techniques. It's not specifically that Japan is better than China or Korea. I think all of these places have amazing traditions, and so it's our job here, where we are a young country by contrast, to bring and learn from all those traditions of the world. And there is so much amazing crossbreeding happening.
Wow. Next question. There's someone here. Is there a mic person here? Is there another person I'm not seeing? And there's a person over here. So we have 2 questions. Thank you. I think over here was the other person. Can you raise your hand who you were over here with your question? Oh, there you go. There we are. Thank you. Okay, friend.
Hi. I do a lot of research with families in particular and individuals pursuing wellness. And something that I've noticed is that financial stability has an impact on our ability to pursue some of these rituals and routines. And I number myself among, I think, many people in this room. We're pretty privileged to be here and to have these snacks and to hear these insights, and from a place of, I hope, just human compassion. I'm just curious what suggestions each of you have for the families who do want to restore hearth and community and connectedness around food, but maybe I'm a single parent with 3 people in the back seat screaming for a Happy Meal. And I'm just curious what suggestions you can offer.
So I think a lot about this as well. Thank you for asking that question. I think there's no amount of me telling you how to cook something and set a table that's going to change these deeply problematic systemic issues. So to me, that's a social safety net question. Those are like the long-term big picture answers to how to help those people have better lives. People, underprivileged people, comes from, things way beyond what I can offer. But also, I don't think that the only way to have a food ritual is a beautiful weekly meal with your friends in their gorgeous backyard. I think it could even be, oh wow, we went back to McDonald's this week and we got a different Happy Meal. Mom, we have this collection of all the toys that we prize in our family and create a memory around. So I think it's just something as small as time and memory and food together. I don't think one is worth more or less. I think especially for kids, I'm not a psychologist, but I do a lot of therapy for myself, is like being attended to by the parents and the adults in your life. And I think that food and the table offers that. And I think time also is a luxury. Time also is a privilege. Time is something, food costs not only money, it also costs time to prepare. And a single mother with multiple jobs doesn't have time. But I do think sort of standardizing tiny moments over the course of a week or a month will make a difference in the long run.
Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I want to thank you as well. When I teach happiness at Berkeley, economic inequality and health disparities and food disparities, food deserts, fundamental to the United States, undermines every metric of well-being, so you're right to call it out. And we can learn, picnics, for example, are a time-honored tradition, a lot of collectivist cultures. That's a ritual, and Western Europeans often forget that in more privileged contexts, so we can learn from others. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, once a week we got to pick out cereal. I mean, you know, my mom had 5 kids, busy, but like I remember that was a big deal when we got to pick out like one sugar cereal. It was huge, life-changing.
Just here at the Well Festival talking about our sugar cereals and
Lucky
McDonald's Happy
Charms.
Meals.
Right.
So much
Fight
for
with
that.
my brother. Is it going to be honeycomb? And it was one cereal that I had to agree with my brothers with, so I'm just telling you that. I think we have time for one more quick one. Go ahead. Thank you.
Don? Okay, great. So how do you think the stigma around eating certain foods or having a certain diet has affected women as a demographic?
Good. Well, just a light question to go out on.
We have 20 seconds.
Like, okay, 20 seconds. Class now, how has, yeah, okay, go. It's bad. I'll tell you, it's bad. That's what it is. It's bad. It sucks.
I don't know how to answer that.
It is an ongoing issue, body image and women and food, absolutely. And I think the pages of our well section will probably address that soon. How am I doing? Am I like wrapping it into the well section? Nice. I don't think we can answer that in this short time, but thank you. And let's thank our amazing guests.